What's up, guys? Hopefully, you know me. I am Zap, your Renew Nashville and Membership Program Manager here at the Entrepreneur Center. Uh, Hopefully, if you haven't tuned in to kind of these CEO stories that we've been running for the past few weeks, it's really to get an understanding of people's COVID story, their business story, but also their COVID story. Really, when COVID hit back in late March, early April, the first people I called on were the folks who ran businesses who were severely affected by the 2008 crash to be like, oh my gosh, what do we do? So I really think what's so great about the CEO story is learning, all right, we're, 8 months into this. How have folks pivoted? How have they struggled? What are the lessons learned? And it's almost like a time capsule for forever, which is so cool. But hopefully, as people are continuing to pivot, continuing to find ways forward, just inspiration. Anyways, the National Museum of African American Music, as I've learned, also for short, we call NAMAM, is here to speak with us with Dionne Lucas. They came to us from, if you were with our workshop with Moncherie, our EC marketing advisor. She's like genuinely the most popular advisor after her workshop she hosted a few weeks ago, connected us, and she works with them. But we're so stoked. Anyways, Dionne, I'll hand things off to you. And I think a great way to start is really just have you talk about yourself first.
Okay, well, thank you, Zach, and thanks for everyone for joining. I know there's so many Zooms you could be on now, so the fact that you have chosen to hang out with us is very, very exciting. So I am Dionne Lucas. I am the Director of Retail Marketing and Sales with the museum, and what that means is I'm pretty much over everything that's revenue generating. So ticket sales, group sales, event rentals, e-commerce. Yeah, so pretty much that. I'm from Gulfport, Mississippi. So lots of hurricanes here lately. But I'm from literally 2 blocks from the Gulf of Mexico is my home. So I go home pretty often. I'll be home for Thanksgiving. And left Mississippi right after high school and went to Atlanta, attended Clark Atlanta University. Um, which I loved and lived there for many years. Growing up in Mississippi was pretty cool. I was a classical pianist for most of my life, and I taught piano lessons. I played for church, and then I started playing for several churches. And then when I left, I said, "Hey, I don't think I ever want to play the piano again." So it was fun and it was my whole life. And then I'm like, yeah, what's next? So yeah, so in Atlanta, ended up getting an internship at Coca-Cola, which then started a career in brand marketing and PR. So worked for Coca-Cola for 10 years, 6 in Atlanta and then 4 in Michigan. So that was pretty cool. Kind of went from the South all the way to some northern cold that I had never experienced before, and I'm still trying to recover. So it was it was a great learning experience there. And then I got into this weird industry of cigars. So I worked for RJ Reynolds on machine made cigars, doing branding and marketing research. And then I started working for a company out of Copenhagen, which was pretty fun, but lots of travel. And at that point was married and had a kid. So that was a bit much, but I worked for them for about 4 years. So I spent a lot of time making cigars. What is the blend? What are we gonna call it? What is the packaging? Did a lot of partnerships and a lot of launches. Very male dominated field, not much diversity at all, but it was a pretty good experience for me overall. And I really enjoyed it, which is actually how I got to Tennessee. A company out of Kentucky that was a cigar manufacturer moved me to Tennessee to work for them as their director of marketing. So then after that, ended up at NAMAM, which Zap, you said it so well. So I ended up at NAMAM, the National Museum of African American Music, where I've been almost 3 years. So started there as the director of marketing and communications, and then about a year ago, went to the operations role. So I'm second in command to running the museum operation. So it has been pretty exciting, and even more exciting lately in lieu of COVID. So definitely want to talk to you guys a little bit more about that. But let me start by giving you a little bit of information about the museum. So some of you are probably very familiar with it because it has been in the making since 1998. So
1998? I didn't even know that. Holy
that's
smoke.
crazy. That's crazy. People like, so the newcomers are like, wow, what is this? What's happening? But the people that have followed it since the beginning are almost fatigued, like, oh my gosh, will you please just put some instruments in a building and open it, So it's so interesting. You can see it in the faces. It's either like, so now that we're so close, it's like, this is about to open, right? And I'm like, yes, it is. We're finally here. So in 98, the concept was conceived. And it was just conceived to be a arts and cultural museum that was, African American based, but all about Tennessee history. So then the concept changed from Tennessee history to, well, let's just, so the names and the iteration changed over the years. So the name, am I back on? Yeah. So the names and the iterations changed over the years, and then some research was done. Gosh, I think it was in 2007, and it was done by the CBC and some other large organizations. And they say, hey, we should just focus this museum on music. So let's be music, and then let's do the whole country. Let's not just do Tennessee, because then that means tourism. So if it's the National Museum, then it makes it a whole different tourism attraction than it is if you say this is just the Tennessee Black Music Museum. So the name has changed many times. The recession happened, so the fundraising stopped, and so the project has started and stopped several times. But now we're here.
Who were the main stakeholders in like 1998?
So it was Francis Guest, it was Rosetta Perry, it was T.B. Boyd and the Boyd Publishing family. Ben Rector, I think, was also a part of it early on. The mayors over the years have been very instrumental in it. And then just a lot of the universities, so Belmont and Vanderbilt and TSU, they've always been, very strong supporters and advocates. But earlier on, Francis Guest, it was his concept. He had gone to Atlanta and had attended an event at the Hank Aaron Museum at Hank Aaron's home, and then came back and said, hey, we should have this museum. And so when I'm traveling back in the day, when people traveled and telling people about the museum, they're always like, why is this in Nashville? So that just kind of freaks them out. Like, why isn't this in Atlanta or Detroit or LA? And so that is usually the biggest hurdle, is explaining to people who have never really lived here or spent time here that this isn't just country music Nashville. Like, this is where so much music was mastered, and so many of the African American greats got their careers, and the history of Jefferson Street. And then if you expand it to all of Tennessee, then you have Beale Street, and so there's just so much rich history here that people just don't know about. So it's been kind of fun to take them through that, and then they say, oh my gosh, like, now it makes sense. So, because I didn't know it before I moved here, but when I moved here, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, everybody's walking around with a guitar or something. Like, I feel like, I need to get a guitar just so I can walk around and not look like I'm not from here. So even the airport, I got to the airport, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like all this live music in the airport. Doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. So it's pretty amazing. I mean, I know we have more professional musicians per capita than any other city in the country, and it is alive and well here in Nashville. So we're proud to tell that story. So yeah, so those were the original stakeholders app. So it's pretty interesting. So the theater in the museum is actually named after Francis Guest. So we're glad to pay homage to him since it was his idea. So we're very in touch with his family and pretty excited about that. So yeah. So the location was originally over on Jefferson Street by the Farmers Market. It was actually, the site was originally over where the Tennessee State Museum is now. But the site now that we're building, which is almost finished, is right there at 5th and Broadway. So it's the old convention center. So it's right by the Bridgestone Arena, right across the Ryman Auditorium. So it's right in the middle of, the downtown nightlife. So we're excited to be a part, of that and bring such a unique venue and attraction like to the central of the city. So we're pretty excited about that.
When did that kind of the construction and like formalize and get off the ground?
So we broke ground in 2017 on 5th and Broadway. And then the building was turned over to us just as an empty shell in 2018. So it was nothing there because the convention center had been completely torn down. And then the shell was completed and handed to us in 2018. And then at that point, we brought in the fabricator. So now they're actually building out the space. So it's 56,000 square feet and it's on one level. So it is massive. And then it's a $60 million project. So trying to fundraise for $60 million, it takes some time. And then just to build out the space itself takes some time. So the build out began in 2019. And then, so then obviously that just takes time. So we have 5 different galleries and man, so every day I go in there, it's so different. So like yesterday, a lot of the artifacts have been put into the message gallery, which is all about hip hop and urban youth and, just the messages that they had to get across and, their deep inner feelings during this time. Talks about the war on drugs and, just Yo MTV raps and just all the things that were hip hop, during this particular era. And so just to see some of the artifacts from DJ Kool Herc and LL Cool J and just, so it's just some really cool things that are like actually like up in the space now. Fab Five Freddy and just, it's amazing. Like it's Cardi B stuff. And it's everything because the museum starts in the 1600s and then it goes all the way up to now. So you see everything from the songs that came about as a result of slavery, when the slaves first came over, and they had the music that was really just to serve as some point of hope for them. And then you see it come all the way full circle to actually seeing, Nicki Minaj and Kendrick Lamar and, like some of their currents in there. So it's a full story. The best way to think about it is a history museum put to music. So if you think about what kind of music came out of slavery, what kind of music came out of the war on drugs or prohibition or, the Renaissance period. So if you just think about it that way, then that's because it's not a Hall of Fame. So a lot of people are like, oh, well, I have these artifacts from so-and-so. And it's like, yeah, that's, it doesn't really fit in with the storyline. So we're not just collecting stuff and putting it up because the person was important. It's a specific story that we're telling about the influence and the contributions that African Americans have made to the American soundtrack. So if it doesn't fit within the storyline, then we don't take the artifact. And the best part about my job is that I get to say, oh, let me put you in touch with the curators, because then they get to tell them like that artifact doesn't fit in the storyline. So
do you have any, what's like the craziest artifact someone has offered?
Oh my God. So some people will just say, hey, I have a old collection of records. And they may say, I have 300 of them. Like, do you want them? But what I notice is people want you to take all of them. Like they don't want you to kind of pick through and see what you want. They want you to, to come and get all of them. And even with some of the ones that we did want, they'll say, well, look, this is a good example. So I get a call one day, get an email, it's Shaka Khan's manager. And he's like, hey, Shaka has all of her old costumes in a she shed. And I just thought I'd call you guys and see if you want them. And I'm like, a she shed? So does that mean like it's not temperature controlled and it's not preserved correctly? So she's like, yeah, we have everything from the 70s. Like we have everything. So it's pretty interesting that people will say, hey, you want this stuff? Some of it is like crinkled up in garbage bags and, so obviously you have to see what you can work with.
That's so
we have some cool items from the Pointer Sisters. They've kept everything that they've ever had. And they have this amazing scrapbook of all the programs and flyers, and like they literally kept all of their outfits. And so, many years ago, and I can't remember the year, so they were the first Black group to perform at the Grand Ole Opry. And when they performed, it was a boycott out front of people who were against the fact that they were performing. Because of course they did country and they've done so many different genres, and then they were the first group ever to win best group, and get a Grammy. Not the first female, not the first Black, but they won the first Grammy for best group. So just to be able to work with them, we sent someone to their home in LA to interview them. And so, so it's been some pretty cool things that people offer you. But the funny stuff is like, I'm like, no, Shaka, we're not going to sell wigs in the museum store. But it's good to know that you have wigs for sale. But
it would be cool if you did.
like we don't want to sell hair. Like we don't want to sell hair in the museum. So it's kind of funny. But people are passionate and excited about the project. And so we're grateful for that. And, just the city has been so supportive. So that's been pretty cool to kind of get all that love back. But yeah, so our opening is still scheduled for this fall. And so we're going to probably start out just with members only. So the memberships are like $50 a piece, and then you can come and go as much as you want for a year. And then if you're a student, it's $25 a piece. So it's pretty reasonable to get a membership, but we'll probably just start off with members only. We're still working with our marketing team to finalize that, but that's kind of what we're leaning to now, but it's definitely opening this fall. So we are in the final phases of setting everything up. And then you add COVID to that, and things just have gotten really exciting. So for instance, yesterday, I was down with the team just to talk about volunteers. So it's COVID, and usually people that volunteer at museums are retired people, former school teachers that are well-versed in history and different things. But in COVID, what does that look like? Right? Because you can't expect that people are gonna volunteer to come downtown Nashville and put themselves at risk. So what that means to us as a business is we will probably end up paying temporary workers to come in and do work that would normally be free. So of course that wasn't part of the original plan, but that's what we have to do because we need more people than we did before to help with all the wiping down and organizing and making sure people are spaced out. So we need more volunteers than we normally would need. And then just trying to get volunteers that are willing to come in to a situation such as this pandemic. So then you have a different cost structure now because you need volunteers there. If you're open, you need them. If you're doing a special event, you need them. So you can't really operate without them, and then of course you have to pay for their parking. So if you need more volunteers, then now you're having to pay because you don't want to bring on a whole bunch of part-timers that you may then have to lay off if you don't need them for enough hours. And so we're just trying to be very smart and very thoughtful about people and what their needs are, and being very gracious because we're asking them to come into downtown Nashville to a situation that many are comfortable with. And then there are many others that are like, hey, I know I signed up to be a volunteer last year for you guys, but, we have to really think about that a little bit differently now. So we're kind of working with that. So that was yesterday's, we're kind of trying to solve that issue. Like, how much is this going to cost? And, so if we open this many hours a week and we need this many volunteers per hour, so it's just, just the new way of business during COVID. So luckily we haven't had to furlough. We've continued to hire. I think we hired 5 people. Yesterday I made an offer. So we probably hired 6 people during COVID, and we're still hiring more people this week because in order for us to open, we still have to continue on with our hiring plan because we still have these positions to staff and front desk and security, and we've just brought on another IT manager. So we still have to prepare to open, in lieu of this because we've come too far to stop. So we have to keep going. So yeah. So that's been good, Zach.
Awesome. If we back up a little bit, I know you kind of mentioned it And I know it's extensive, but I think it'd be cool if you could share with the audience a little bit more about the history of Black music here in Nashville and here in Tennessee, and maybe just pull a few nuggets that might be featured in the museum would be
Yeah,
awesome to know more
yeah,
about.
yeah, absolutely. So, so long before the country was integrated, the music industry was integrated. So when blacks and whites didn't do anything else together, because that's the way things were situated in the country, musicians worked together. So if you were mastering music for Motown or anywhere else that was Black music, it was being mastered here in Nashville. So when you think about Jimi Hendrix and his career being launched, right here in Nashville, all the way up to current 3 6 Mafia, being the first hip hop group, to win an Oscar. You think about the history of Dr. Bobby Jones, who pretty much commercialized gospel music, who was from here and still lives here. And there's an interactive in the museum that is done in his likeness. So they literally went to his church where he was directing the choir and recorded his movements and created a interactive called Singing with the Church Choir. So you will stand in front of a green screen and be taught a song by him. And then when you finish, then you'll have we have RFID bracelets. So when you have interactives or find a playlist that you like, you can just tap it and you take that content with you and it gets directly downloaded to your email address. So you can post, share, or save it, or however you like to keep it. And so you'll be able to take that content with you. So when you look at the interactive, you will be in the choir with these choir members virtually, and you will be singing with, Dr. Bobby Jones. And if you've never met him, I don't know anyone that's more of a character than him. So he's a pretty important guy in gospel music, and he's right here. And then if you think about, CeCe Winans and her family, you think about, BB King up in Memphis. And the list goes on. And also just the songwriters. So many of the songs that are so near and dear to us in African American music were written by songwriters, right here. I was interested to find out that United Pressing, they made all the vinyl for Motown. So any Motown record that was made was all done right here in Nashville. Like all the pressing of the vinyl for Motown was here. And so back in those days, the African American musicians, they could not stay in the hotels. So till this day, the top part of United Pressing is an old apartment that they have not touched. So that was the apartment that the artists could stay in while they were here pressing their records. And it's literally like the paneling with the record player console that matches the wall and the black and white check floors with the super low ceilings with just little twin beds. Like the suite is still there. And that's where the Motown artists stayed, while they were getting their records made. So there's a lot of really cool nuggets like that you'll get to learn about and read about when you come and hang out with us. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool, Zap. Nashville is and still is. If you're making music and you're Black, you got to come through Nashville. Not even just from a concert perspective, but the between the songwriting and the mastering and the producing, like all roads go through Nashville, and you can't really go around it. So people say LA, people say New York, and people even say Atlanta, but that's not what we know as true here. So you'll also see a lot of the rich history of Jefferson Street. My gosh, I don't know if you guys have ever gone to the Jefferson Street Sound Museum and just walk through all that history that Lorenzo Washington has captured there. And then I think it was Vanderbilt that paid for an app for that museum. So if you walk down Jefferson Street with the app, it'll show you like, oh, well, this is the so-and-so, Club Baron, and it'll tell you who all performed there and when. And then when you get to the next location, it'll say, well, hey, this used to be, another performance venue, or this is where the artist stayed. And so you can see all of the prominent artists throughout African American history that had prominent careers here that kicked off in Jefferson Street. You know, you'll also learn about, you know, we all know Soul Train, but the original show was called Night Train, and it was produced and made right here in Nashville. So before there was a Soul Train, then Nashville had Night Train, which got very, very popular, you know, but then ended, and then Soul Train, you know, kind of took over and became the show. But that idea was started right here. So just a lot of really cool stories you'll see. And
Yeah,
we,
awesome. Thanks for
I can't
sharing
give
that.
away all the goodies.
Oh no, you have to see it in person.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about like the NAMAM team. Like, who does it take to really put a museum together before a museum even exists?
You know, let me know if when you figure out that answer. So it's a very diverse group. So I come from Fortune 500 corporations that have massive marketing budgets and structure and policies, and so like again, I've only been there almost 3 years. So Henry Hicks, he started in 2007. He's the current president and CEO. He started as a board member, and then he was asked to be the chairman of the board. And then he was asked to run it. Well, what's interesting about Henry is he comes from a banking background. So he used to work for Bank of America, and then he was in investment banking of his own. Like he was one of the owners of Grayline that brought Grayline Tennessee here to Nashville. So he had a background. Oh, he was also a White House fellow. So just a very different resume as most CEOs for a nonprofit, because he was a financial guy. So he understands numbers, how people look at numbers, and what makes sense. So I think that there's no one else that could have done that and raised $60 million in Nashville, particularly for Broadway. I don't know if anybody else could have done that but him. So he is the leader of the crew. And then we have a team of scholars that most of them are consultants that have worked with the storyline and developed all the stories that will be told in the museum. Then they're also the ones that research and do all the fact checking. And, you know, a lot of them are ethnomusicologists. So they are people that have PhDs that specialize in the intersection of music and history. So on our team, we have our director emeritus. His name is Dr. John Fleming. So he's the national president of state and local history for the whole US. He's also been a part of the build of, you know, many museums over the years. So he's probably the most prominent African-American in the museum business, other than Lonnie Bunch, who is in DC at the African-American History and Culture Museum. But he is, he's world renowned for his work. We also have Dr. Portia Motsby. So she's probably the far greatest ethnomusicologist in the world. So she specializes in many genres of Black music. And so, I mean, it doesn't matter who you want to get in touch with, she's who you call. So I'm like, hey, Donny Hathaway's birthday is coming up, and I was thinking about, kind of reaching out. Oh, we hear you. Call so-and-so. He was a writer, So she's always very funny. When you call her, you have to be prepared to give her 30 minutes, but you'll definitely hang up, getting your question answered. So there's a lot of academician PhDs that are on staff. We probably have more PhDs on staff than any other Black museum in the country. And we're definitely the largest Black music museum in the country.
What would be second? I was just curious.
I don't know who would be second.
Doesn't matter, because we're first.
We're first. We're first. Now Motown is doing a rebuild. So I know
Detroit.
Yeah, so they just started a capital campaign because, of course, they have an amazing museum currently that's been up for years, but it's in a small home. It's very well done, but now they're in the process of building a big, $50-60 million project that'll take a couple of years for them to do there. So we're still the biggest. We're still the biggest.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, the Motown, I spent a couple summers in Detroit. It's pretty small, actually. It'd be surprising.
They made really good use of the space, but it is very small. And then I went to the Trap Museum recently in Atlanta. That's T.I.'s Trap Music Museum. And it's pretty small, but it is very mighty. Like, it is very well curated and very well done. Yeah, so there's some really good ones that we're excited about. And then, one thing that I'm doing in the store is I'm selling merchandise from some of those other museums. So I have Stax stuff, I have Sun Records, I have Motown, so we're supporting and celebrating. We also have Lorenzo's over off Jefferson Street. So we're supporting and embracing and, learning from each other and working from each other.
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. Uh,
For that 60 million raised, I'm not sure if you know the total breakdown. Actually, funny enough, we talked to Music City Baseball last week, who's raising money to bring an MLB team
yeah,
here.
they are.
And I mean, they're still in the process, but it's really interesting hearing them talk about getting that money. I'm so curious, like, kind of what is the breakdown of that 60 million? Like, is it, wealthy individuals investing? Is it corporations? Is it the city? Is it grants even? Maybe walk us through that a little bit more if you can share.
Right. Well, Zeb, well, first, thank you for the 5 million that you gave personally. So it's from wealthy individuals. No. So a lot of it, the first 10 million was done by the city of Nashville. So, that's one of the answers that I give, and people say, why Nashville? Well, yeah, the history is there and it's super rich and unique, but also we had a city who believed in us and believed in the story, and they put their money where their mouth was. So that was pretty awesome. So that was the kickoff. And so then after that, then you're on your own. Initially, it was a 50 million, and then, now it's 60 million. The good thing is that the land was free. So we were given the land for free, and then all we had to do was pay for the bill, right? So that's a huge help. But I mean, it's still, $50 million. Um, yes, some individuals that are wealthy gave. I don't know the breakdown offhand. I used to know. We've had some new donations come in
No
recently.
worries. I didn't know if you had corporate partners. I get it's
Absolutely,
more so just
absolutely.
understanding like all the different players who are involved in this.
Yeah, so some of the big players are the banks. So Bank of America, Regions Bank, Fifth Third. So a lot of bank support in really big numbers. Um, a lot of just other corporations that have given. We got our first big commitment from one of the record labels because that they were pretty much last to kind of come on board. And a lot of wealthy individuals, some of which didn't really want their names mentioned earlier on. Um, the feature gallery is actually named after T.B. Boyd's publishing company. So they gave a 7-figure gift for naming rights of that. But we've had support from so many, from the Ryman to Truist Bank, um, the Mike Curb Foundation. So it's been a wide variety of different types of organizations. We
Mhm.
work really closely and have gotten support from the Country Music Association, and so it's a little bit of everyone, really. Yeah, some of the companies are national, but most of them are not. Most
Yeah,
of
I was curious if it was very Nashville based
them, a lot
funding,
of
and it
national.
sounds like it is.
Well, some of them are companies that are national, especially like some of these banks, but then the local offices are the ones that made sure that they saw the donation through. Does that make sense? So
Mhm.
they advocated for us even though they're headquartered elsewhere.
Mhm.
But it's
Totally.
the local higher ups that helped us secure it. So Kevin Lavender, he's at Fifth Third, and he's been the chairman of the board since the beginning. And so he's been very instrumental. There's so many people. The good thing about it is because it's been 20 years in the making, it's everybody's museum because everybody has been called on for a favor or made some donations or introduced someone to somebody or worked there at some point, or even like the Moncheries, who's, she's been she's been someone that we can call on if we needed help with marketing or media training or experiential marketing to do surveys, or so just there's so many hands. So we like to think that this is our house in so many different ways. That's pretty cool. That's
Awesome.
pretty cool. The nonprofit efforts here in Nashville, like I've never seen a city where people work together. Like,
Volunteer state, baby.
I mean, and you hear that, right? Like you come in and you're like, yeah, there's volunteers. I come from Atlanta where the United Way is headquartered. And, so everybody is volunteering, but it's different here because people truly don't treat you like you're a competitor because they understand like if you bring more people to the city, especially people who've never come before,
All
then that's
boats rise.
that's good for
Yeah.
everybody, because if they come to see us, then maybe they'll stop and eat here, or maybe they'll stop and pick up a beer, here, or or they'll go see a show. So there's so many different, so many different ways that it benefits the city. And the CVC, like they have been friends and advocates all along. So I do a lot of
When
meetings
you
with
say
them.
CDC, folks, we need the
See,
Community Development Corporation.
no, the CVC, the Nashville
Oh,
Convention and
CDC.
Visitors. Yes, the
I literally keep
CVC.
hearing CDC and thinking of the COVID CDC guidelines.
Oh, that's because you're watching too much news. You're watching too much
I
news.
know.
Yeah.
Let's jump to that though. Kind of, let's bring it to like March, and COVID hits. And was your timeline still to launch the museum this fall, always in
No,
March?
it was Labor Day before COVID.
Okay. Yeah. Walk me through kind of like what happened in March. What changes did you have to make? What'd you start doing?
I mean, I'm still in counseling, trying to get over like what happened in March, how we had to push this back, and then now like downtown is empty and the hotels. We can probably go and be squatters in the best hotels in Nashville right now, but hopefully not for long. So when March came, we were in shock like everyone else. We had a lease that was coming to end. So we literally moved out of our office since March. I think we moved out 2 months ago. So everybody was already working from home. It didn't make sense to start a new lease, obviously, because nobody was going to be in the office. And then we're planning to move in the museum within the next 30 days. So everybody's just still working from home. So initially it was just setting up, all of the infrastructure that we needed to be able to carry out our business and communicate with each other. So Henry's very, very organized. So he made sure everybody had teams, and we had a very, very specific protocols. So, you had to have a designated workspace and you were to log on, every day. So we were doing a check-in every morning at 8:15 Monday through Friday. And so it was a way to kind of stay connected, see each other. We kind of started the day together because we have quite a few employees who moved here within the last year and a half, and they're just home by themselves. So it was important that we check in just on everybody and have that face-to-face time and say, hey, this is what I'm working on this week. And, just making sure that people were still in the loop. Because what we didn't realize is like that whole pass down the hallway and stop in and update or hearing other conversations and getting brought in the loop that way, it just that all went away. And so our staff is about 21 to 22 people. And, we were very connected on a daily basis with everything because we're so small and so many people wear so many hats. So it was a rough transition at first. So then we kind of got our bearings, and so okay, now we're fine. But but initially it was okay. Well, we won't be home. We won't be home long because we thought it was temporary. So we kind of went through that. But then as we saw that there was no end in sight, then we started kind of looking at the business and the operations differently. So we had parking allocations and a contract downtown. So then you start looking at the operating expenses and see like what do we need to cut out? Just as you would with your own home financials, like you have a crisis going on. Like let's start with the budget and see like what do we need to discontinue? What do we need more of? How are we going to try to keep things normal? So every month we have what you call family meal. So we have lunch together. It's usually catered in, nothing too elaborate, but we sit down and all eat together. So even for that, we still were having our family meal time once a month just via Zoom, and they didn't pay for the food. So you kind of had to go in the kitchen and bring your own food. The good thing is you can bring your own drink if, depending on what you had in the house. So that's pretty cool too. But so just trying to keep the normalcy because, nonprofit, as you know, it's just, the teams are small. everybody leaned so hard on each other. So we were still trying to keep that connectivity. So that was kind of like the first thing that was super important to the chairman. But then we started thinking about like forms of revenue, like how can we diversify the revenue streams? Like, so what are our assets that we can use now to help people? Like, so music is a form of healing. Like, it's a connector. So we had the riots going on and, just protests all over the country in the midst of all of the heightened emotions from people that had lost people from COVID, or either was just worried to death that they were going to catch it. So as you all know, like it has not been just a more emotional time for so many different reasons. So I was like, well, how can we be a part of the solution for people, for companies, because people started calling us to see how we can help because they wanted to engage us. And then there were certain partnerships that we would reach out to and say, hey, so we started taking a lot of our programs virtually, but we tried to do them differently than others. Because we're an academic institution, we just didn't want to have online concerts. We wanted something that would tie back to the storyline. So we would try to get artists that were either in the museum or had some type of relationship with the museum. We have a lot of board members that are related to artists in terms of their work. And so, so it was quite a pivot in our virtual programming. We had some already, but of course, nothing like it is now. So we just started connecting to people that way, which has been really important. There's so much good content. So you're just trying to make it different. So you give somebody a reason to make it worth their while. And how do you craft that? So that's been pretty interesting. Our e-commerce existed and it was built out, but it was never really promoted very well. It was almost like if you look for it, you can find it. If you're on our social media, you'll see something every now and then. We've added something new, but I wish we had been more developed in that aspect before we gone into COVID. So then that brought on something new. And then now I'm doing a lot of virtual events. So we did the Nashville Cares Gala virtually at the museum. So we just had Shannon Sanders come and perform. It was recorded. And we had this fantastic event with Nashville Cares. I think they raised $105,000 on a virtual event. And we were able to help with that. Like that was the first performance ever on our stage. And it was super cool because the ladders and the paint cans were all on the stage, and then it was still kind of covered in dust. But we had just a beautiful piano and, a beautiful performance, just right there on the stage. And then we had artists that were painting. And so we created this whole event with people in different locations. And it was really cool. It was really cool. So it was just about who are we as a museum? What kind of messages do we want to share with our donors, with just all of our different constituencies during this time? Because the message wasn't the same for everybody, right? So people that were our social media friends, they needed something different than our corporate partners needed. Wow, we got calls from churches, and I don't know. I think I was overwhelmed to just see the outreach of people reaching out to us to see how we can help. The marketing team has done a phenomenal job, and so has our programs team. We're creating playlists and creating opportunities to partner with people that wasn't necessarily based on money, but it was just based on feeding a specific constituency. So
just keeping that feeling alive. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so tell us about your opening date launch date has shifted. What is it? And then has COVID kind of affected just like the long-term plans of the museum? And if so, how did it?
Oh my gosh. I hope you guys don't hear that. So the opening date has slightly shifted. So it'll be before the year is out. It will be this fall, and I can't say it, or marketing will probably show up at my door. So, we've changed it before, and we don't want to change it again. So that is kind of where we are now. So as soon as the date is kind of open to the public, then 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 you'll hear about it. But we're very excited, and it's just know that it's really soon, and it's gonna be worth the wait. Um, yeah, yeah, and just make sure you put it on your calendar. But we had these big grand opening plans that we can't do. So we had all these artists that were gonna be coming in. I was like, Henry, I want planes landing on Broadway. Like we were reserving patios from the different hotels because we needed media to be able to get the better views. I mean, I'm talking from parades to, we had some really big plans. And so now you can't even use the word grand because that scares people, kind of seems germy, and it seems irresponsible because it is. So now it's just going to be a soft opening, that'll be kicked off with just some small media VIP events, and then a lot of our partners from the city, and so it'll just be a lot of small groups and then members. So we'll have a grand opening later when it makes sense. So we had Outkast calling because it was the 25th anniversary of Stankonia, October 31st. So they were supposed to come and hang out in the store and do some signings, and because we're selling vinyl and all this cool stuff in the store. I spoke to Eric B. and Rakim's team the other day. Like, they're like, well, we can still just come and, maybe just do something small on the stage that, maybe there's no audience there. So people are still trying to come, and we're still trying to make it make sense so that everybody stays safe, and that is even worth the time, right? Mm-hmm. But so the grand opening plans have definitely gone from here to let's just do something small and just get open, and let's just let people in because we want to share. And so the grand opening will just be later. Like, we had a gala of 900 guests. Last year we had 500 guests. But so you're talking about a change of plan. So just going forward to the future. So the plan that I've written for COVID, I don't like to call it a COVID plan. I just kind of call it a crisis plan, because maybe it's not COVID, or maybe it's COVID, 20 or 21. So just trying to set up and make decisions that will suffice if any type of crisis happens. Does that make sense? So not just thinking about how do we get past COVID, but how do we make this museum and this structure a pandemic ready, museum. And then in thinking about that, it's like, how do you sanitize the museum without sanitizing the experience, right? So you don't want to be so focused on that as top of mind that you take away from the music. So I've worked very, very closely with David Aronoff, who's the head of infectious diseases for Vanderbilt Medical. He's done about 3 walkthroughs with me, working with some guys from Meharry and Recovery Health. So just a lot of good research and good work is being done on what is the best way to take this super technologically advanced museum with all these interactives. So, I have everything from microphone covers, because we have a rap battle. So instead of 2 people being able to be in the room rapping against each other, now I can only have 1 person in at a time. But you can still, you do your piece, and then somebody else has to come in and do their piece. But there are styluses, there are gloves, there are microphone covers, there are earphone covers, you incur expenses, but there's no price for people's health and people's comfort. Just even decreasing the capacities, like, what a hit that will take, but I'd rather have a small group in and make sure they're safe. But our contact tracing, like the protocols are something that we feel really, really good about. I really, really feel good about it. It's definitely made us think about the traffic flow, and everybody goes through museums differently. It's almost like the grocery store. Like, some people always have to go the exact same route no matter what they're going to get, right? So some people will go chronologically from gallery to gallery, and then some people will read every word, so just looking and see what is people's natural flow, and how can we not interrupt it but still keep it safe and distant. So a lot of time is going into that. And I think we're ready. I think we got a pretty solid plan. The Good to Go program has been phenomenal. A lot of resources to help with our staff. So yeah, I feel really good about it. I think it'll make us stronger going forward because it'll keep us innovative. And it's almost like if you went to work every day thinking you were going to get a 30-day notice. So if you kind of take your business and think about what's the worst thing that can happen and how can I prepare for that now, right? Because if you wait to prepare, it's like if you get the resume ready once you've already been, told to find, you just lost your job. That's hard because of the emotions and then wait, let me wrap my head around it. But if you just stay ready.
Would you like any ketchup? No, ma'am.
Sorry, let me mute.
No problem. No problem. And yes, I do want ketchup. But so if you stay ready, you never have to get ready. So I mean, I think that's true in all businesses and just in life. Like you just stay ready. Yeah.
Well, final question, and then let's open up for audience questions. How can people engage with the museum before y'all open? What should people do?
Well, hey, the easiest thing to do is to go on blackmusicmuseum.org. Again, that's blackmusicmuseum.org because the acronym is way too difficult to say. So we figured that would be a little bit easier to remember. So you can sign up to get our newsletter. So you'll get all the information about the opening and all the events and how you can schedule and make sure you're part of things. And you can also sign up for your membership so that you make sure you can set up for your time, your specific time and date that you want to come in with your friends and family. So the good thing is if you have a membership, you can buy tickets for other people. So if you are a member, Tim, then you can buy 4 other tickets for non-members and you guys can come together. So the members get to buy tickets for non-members. So that's pretty cool too. So, but our social media is at the NAMAM. So it's at the NMAAM. And that information is on the website as well. So we'd love to have you keep in touch with us and follow us and share feedback of what you want to see. And yeah, if you have any questions, I'll make sure I have my email given to the EC, so you can always call me.
That's awesome. Folks in the audience, I know I had some questions chatted in throughout this, but does anyone want to unmute themselves and ask a question? Maybe Elmira, I know you had a question if you're still on here.
Yeah, I've got a few questions.
Hit us with them, Corey.
Hello, everybody. This is Corey.
Hi, Corey. You sound like you should be on the radio.
Oh, thank you very much for that compliment. Okay, so the first question, I've got a few questions for you. The first one is, I heard that you're a classical pianist. And so I'm dealing with, I mean, as a lot of people are during this time, just this like identity crisis, this like, what is my identity and whatnot. And so did you often hope to steer your career to that of music? And did you question your sense of identity as you worked for Copenhagen and RG Reynolds and Coca-Cola? And was the move to NAMAM as a result of this passion or identity questioning?
Wow, that's an amazing question. So my mom, she died when I was very, very young. So 4 or 5 years old. And so my grandparents put me in piano lessons very young. I think it was just to give me a distraction for me and my sister to have something else to do. And so I think it was very nurturing to me. I was really good at it. So it was very satisfying and fulfilling. And it became like my solace was to just go and play. But by the time I had graduated from high school, I had decided that I did not want a career in it, that it was just my hobby. I'm 5'9", I never played a sport. I had only ever played piano and organ, and I played the flute and piccolo and some other things like that. But no, I didn't have any identity crisis there. But it was just more, it kind of fed my soul.
Okay, so the other question I had was, did you learn from Coca-Cola, RJ Reynolds, like what did you learn from them in Copenhagen that gave you the confidence to change industries and confront the challenges that Daymom brought, being so early in development?
What I learned, I'm sorry. So the gardeners were here, so I'm sorry it got too
Okay.
loud. What I learned was I only know how to market one way. And because all I had ever done was for-profit marketing. So my approach to marketing the museum, I marketed like a for-profit. I think that any nonprofit that does nonprofit marketing does themselves a disservice. When I worked at the larger companies, I had huge budgets. So what I did for NAMAM was I wrote the plan, and then I figured out how to get it paid for. I didn't go to development to get funds. I used my same marketing that I would have used in partnerships for a for-profit company to get my own, to get funding for my programs. Because if you build a nonprofit marketing budget based on lack, right, then your thinking is small. But if you think like, what is best for this brand, and how do I launch this brand, and think of it like I would have launched any of the sodas or teas or cigars. But if you think about it, if you think it, you limit yourself. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. So I think about some of the partnerships that I've done with NAMAM, from my gosh, from the NFL Players Coalition to just the Recording Academy, to just a lot of different artists. I was just with Gibson earlier this week because we're doing some programming around Lucille. They gave me this replica of Lucille, but I literally called. I said, hey, I need a Gibson rep. I need a Fender rep. I need, so I market it the same way. Like marketing has fundamentals. And what I see in a lot of businesses, and particularly nonprofit, is I see people that are in marketing positions that maybe haven't done marketing before, and I see them doing nonprofit marketing, and I think that is a bad idea.
Thank you.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Who else has a question?
I have a question. It's Elmira here. Thanks for talking to us. This was interesting for me. Like, as a singer, musician, I've been up to Detroit to the Motown Museum. We discussed that here. So my question is, I know you spoke about the intention of the museum, like the historical background and the scholarly perspective. What one word would describe the feeling you want people to have when they leave the museum?
The CFO, Trey McMillan, he left recently to go teach full time. I think he said it best. He said, we're going to make some people cry. And the good thing about the crying is it won't be sadness. There's some sad things in there because obviously there are some very tough subjects being discussed, but it'll just be a conjuring up of emotions from, a song that your grandmother may have played that you heard at church with her, or it could be the song that, that you walked down the aisle on that you hadn't heard in years. So it's a very emotional experience. It really is. It's no other way to describe it. So in the center of the museum, in this major hallway, is a interactive called Transporting Moments. So every 45 minutes, you'll be transported to a historical moment in music history. So I'll give you one. So you'll be transported to when Prince sang the Purple Rain at the Super Bowl. So the lighting will change, the visuals will change. Like you will be superimposed into the audience at the Super Bowl. I mean, so it's just a very emotional experience throughout all of the museum spaces.
That's awesome. Well, we're at 101. I don't know if there's any one, last second pressing question before we wrap up. Just want to give one more opportunity for folks. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everyone for hopping on this call. We'll put this on our YouTube and share this out on Slack. But thank you so much for Dionne. I'm so excited about NAMAM opening up here. Such a cool story to hear. And I think a story that's still unfolding, and we'll keep following.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys.
Bye, everyone.